Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company. It's always been our claim that a lot of innovation comes from backyard mechanics. And today we're going to tour a shop that is actually quite famous for doing custom suspension work, especially on shocks. In this episode, it's going to reinforce that as products age and are no longer in production, aftermarket often picks up where the manufacturers left off and continues support. Such is the case with Bilstein shock absorbers initially installed on small-run Tesla Roadsters. So I first met the owner of this residential shop about 30 years ago or so, actually more, when my Ferrari needed a 30,000-mile engine rebuild. That's one of the things you have to do with Ferraris every few years. Jeff was kind enough to take on the project and actually rebuilt my Ferrari engine in this larger shop here. So the shop we're going into now is what he calls a small shop, and what we're going to see here is the way that he rebuilds shocks, which is one of the things that we came here for today, was to demonstrate that aftermarket and small-time innovators often get it right after the manufacturers drop support for something. So let's go see what's going on in this little residential shop. Here we are with Jeff LeBlond, who for decades has been sought out by some of the top shelf brand owners like Lamborghini, Bugatti. Jeff has rebuilt shocks for a number of these types of cars, and some of these shocks that he rebuilds actually cost more than a Model S. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff and we'll have a few questions for him in his shop here. We had Jeff do some reverse engineering on the Tesla Roadster shocks, Bilstein, and tell us some of the challenges that you face with Bilstein.
Well, Bilstein has a good product. They're very proud. They do not like to tell you anything. They do not like to sell you anything other than a complete shock absorber. So when the shocks on the OEM stuff, especially the, let's say, upper level cars and upper level product, they'll make it almost impossible to rebuild, if not impossible to rebuild, because they want you to buy another shock absorber, even though they're $24,900 each.
We're talking about the Bugatti shocks.
Yeah,
right?
the Bugatti. And
So
I've had to take and custom make all tooling for working on them. Well, here's some of the Bilstein tooling. This whole Vidmar is full. That's all just for working on Bilstein shock absorbers. And then for gas charging them back up, I've had to make tooling like this, where it captures the whole shock absorber and then goes down in to capture and open up a valve, a nut, so you can gas charge it. That whole blue cabinet is full of nothing but tooling. Here's another special tool made. Looks kind of like a piston.
Mm-hmm.
You shove it in there, that catches it. Of course, everything is O-ringed, has to be.
So one of the things that you were showing us was that you were actually able to improve
Yes.
the original design. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when I take them apart, one of the first things I do is I always look at how are they sealing it? What are they doing? The Bilsteins on some of the Tesla shocks had a compression type two-piece rubber seal that would just kind of squeeze together, which is okay, but after a little while that gets hard. You know, just the baking process that goes on in a shock absorber. Hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. Will get that rubber hard, and then it starts leaking. So what I found is by going to a very special seal, a Viton twin-lipped that has a spring, a coil spring backup, you're improving that sealing by about 2,000%. And that's what I do. I think it's a far better seal. Of course, it doesn't cost 25 cents either, but who cares? You know, who wants their shock absorbers leaking? Putting a puddle of oil on the ground.
So it extends the life of the shock absorber
Oh,
too,
yes,
then it sounds
yes,
like.
yes. And the neat thing about it is these improved seals, they actually have less pressure on the main shaft, so it's less wear. Less heat generated too. And by the way, shock absorbers work under the assumption that it's a controlled oil leak. And when they go together and come back apart, but you got to remember they're doing this sometimes at many, many inches a second. It generates so much heat. This is what really hurts a shock absorber, is the oil never gets changed. It'll turn into sludge, then your shock is destroyed.
You had given us some interesting statistics. What would you say is the average lifespan of a shock?
Well, the shock absorber itself could last forever depending upon what materials it's made out of, but to service it, which people don't do, and this is what hurts them, this is what destroys a shock absorber. They don't service them. The oil, you change oil in your car, you know, heck, even your lawnmower, you're going to change the oil. People never change the oils in the shock because they've never been taught about it. 3 to 5 years, max.
3 to 5 years.
And if you're driving a lot, 2 to 3 years. And that oil will start to degrade. And when it starts to degrade, things like this happen. Here's a shim. As you can see, there's a big chunk missing. That happens because the bleed holes in the shock absorber get plugged up. Well, you can't compress oil. Stuff breaks. Here's all kinds of more parts too. Oh.
You had showed us a shaft one time on one of the Roadster Shocks.
Yeah.
It was actually bent.
Yeah.
How did it get that way?
When the oil gets so dirty, it tries to compress. If it can't bleed out and go to the other chamber where it's supposed to go, you can't compress it. Something's going to give. The shaft actually bent because it couldn't go anymore. I've actually seen these shocks where the side of the shock, the main body, blew out.
So deterioration in shocks, is it both age and use?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Don't want to go beyond 5 years.
Okay.
Don't. Extreme, look at racing. And every race, all those shocks get taken apart and that oil gets dumped. New oil every time.
Yeah.
And this is a very important thing with shock absorbers if you want them to last.
Right. Now with the number of Tesla Roadsters that we have come through our shop, I'm the designated test driver. And I notice a distinct difference between the low mileage Roadsters and the high mileage Roadsters.
Yes.
And you know, I would venture to say that the average owner doesn't realize how bad their shocks have gotten because it's such a gradual decline over time.
Correct.
But suddenly they realize that their Roadster, Tesla Roadster, now is a bone-jarring experience when they take it out.
They'll stiffen up, like I said. When the oil goes bad, the bleeds and the shim stocks inside start to plug up. You're actually increasing the values of compression and rebound to where it'll get to the point it'll knock your fillings out of your teeth.
Yeah.
Like a cork on water.
So you recommend a shock rebuild every 5 years or so?
Maximum, yeah.
Maximum even, okay.
Yeah.
To keep that smooth ride that they originally got when they bought the car.
Yeah, you like I said, these things are full of, well, here's a piston. You can see all the little holes in it. These holes start to get plugged up. Well, it'll get to the point to where all of them are plugged. Now what's going to happen? It can't compress. It's just going to go bang, bang, bang until it'll bend the shaft, blow out the main body, destroy something.
Now you showed us some of the bump stops on the Tesla Roadster Shocks that we gave you to rebuild. They were crumbling and badly deteriorated.
Yes.
If you let them get to that stage, what's the penalty?
The shock, if you go, let's say your shock is still operating fairly well, and you go over some moguls or some big dips in the road. Speed bumps. The shock's going to over travel, and I call it crashing inside. They actually smash the insides together. That's when things start breaking, things start bending, and you have to tell the owner, might be better off buying new ones. If you can't buy new ones, then you got to see me and I'll custom make you one, and you don't want to know that price. When I have to start taking tubing, you know, hardened steel, making shafts, milling out pistons. Ooh.
It gets expensive pretty fast, I take it.
And so the 3 to 5 year plan is pretty cheap. But most people just don't understand that.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. I was listening to an audiobook on Audible, today's sponsor. Audible is the leading provider in audiobooks with over 200,000 titles to choose from. Right now, I'm listening to Conquering the Electron by Derek Chung, which was recommended to me by Peter Gruber, our lead engineer. Conquering the Electron is an engaging book about the history of electrons, starting from the discovery of static electricity to the smartphone revolution. Go to audibletrial.com/GruberMotors or click the link below for your first month free. Now back to the video.
We got that.
Let's show that then up close, yeah.
Now here's part of a Tesla Roadster Shock. Oh no, there it is. There it is.
Looks like a clean bend to me.
This is one that got all plugged up. It was just, the oil had turned to solid sludge. It was so old. And what happened is every time it went down, tried to compress, it couldn't. So, let me show you this. This is supposed to be straight within 1/1000th of an inch. It's a centerless ground shaft, hardened. I don't know if you can see that, but there's a big air gap there. That's how much this thing is bent. Now when that bends, what happens is there's a guide and a bearing up here that this rides in, and all of a sudden it can't. So it'll take out the bearing, and it'll take out the housing. And where'd that adjuster rod go?
Right inside here.
Okay. There's this little rod that goes inside. I won't go any further. And this is used for the adjustment. You plunge this down, it works a valve inside of here that releases, and so it makes the shock softer or harder. That also bent to the point, that's as far as it'll go. And it's supposed to disappear and go down. But that shock was not rebuildable. And now here are some of these bump stops that we've been talking about. Now here's one that's still in fairly good shape. Dirty. Here's one, as you can see. Here's what happens to them. It's made out of urethane, but after age, probably this car came from up north where it was seeing some salt or a lot of dirt. This thing will totally degrade and actually fall apart. Now when this goes away, this stops the over travel of the shock. It usually sits up here when the shock is together. And then this is supposed to fit on top of it, but did it over travel? That's supposed to be flat.
No longer flat.
No longer flat.
So with these Roadster shocks that you're showing us here, at least the unrepairable ones, are these parts still available from Bilstein?
The bump stops are, the main shafts And adjusting rods, no. The main bodies, no. The gas piston inside, this one's, there's another piston inside of here where there'll be gas pressure on one side, oil on the other. Those are still available. The seals are still available. But basically, no.
So really then a Roadster,
If this came in this bad, can't do anything with it.
try to find spare parts in a product that is no longer in production. So you essentially have to try to beg, borrow, or steal and find something to replace it with.
Yes.
And you were saying that in order to recreate these types of parts is just prohibitively expensive because of the amount of engineering involved and fabrication and small quantities, small runs.
It can be done, but the cost, like I just got through making a set of shocks for it was a Ferrari early F40. The shocks are no longer available. Can't buy any parts, can't buy any shocks. I had to make them. Cost over, what was it, $2,200 each. Normally it's a $400 shock, times 6.
Times 6. Okay, I was waiting for the final number to arrive here because 2,000 seems almost manageable.
Times 6.
So you had mentioned also that with some of these other exotic cars, like the Bugatti, what is it about those shocks and how much are they?
Well, the Bugatti Veyron shocks that I have done, there's really nothing special about the shock, but they have a lifting body attached to the shock to where it'll lift up the car or lower the car down. Now, the last two that I've done, both the shock and the lifting body were leaking. They do not sell parts. I had to reverse engineer it. I had to figure it out. But I was able to reseal them, repair them. One of them I couldn't. And but they're $24,900 each. Thank you very much.
And that's why we said that a set of shocks for a Bugatti Veyron costs more than a Tesla Model S.
Yeah, times 6, by the way.
Oh, times 6.
6.
Oh, not 4. Okay, all right. So Jeff, what is it that you like doing most?
Creating, taking junk and making a silk purse out of it.
Okay, all right.
I like to take that and make it like new or better than new. I like that. I can sleep good at night.
As in improve on the original design?
Yes, yes.
Perfect, all right. And how many years you been doing this?
I started doing shock absorbers, I think in 1985. I kind of got backed into a corner doing some shock absorbers for a customer that we couldn't buy new ones. There was no one else fixing them. So I had to figure it out and did it. And then he told somebody who told somebody who told somebody. Then after a while I went, gee, you know, I never went to business school, but this in by 9 and out by 5 the same day, not 3 years later, is a good thing. Yeah. And that's when I quit working on the cars and started doing shock absorbers. And then I got hooked up with the Coney Shock Absorber Company, doing shocks for them because they lost their rebuild shop. And then I got connected with Olin's and Penske and a couple other shock absorber companies. And again, it's just, to me, it's fun. I like it.
Well, you know, decades ago when you were rebuilding my Ferrari, I remember seeing wooden crates in the corner of your shop that said Lamborghini on them in sawdust, and there were shock absorbers in there.
Yes.
So you were actually getting these from where? All over the world, or?
Well, again, I'm not supposed to say, but it's been so many years, I probably can. Those came from the factory.
Really?
They were warranty, you know, electronic shocks for Diablos, Murcielagos, cars like that. And leakers. And the factory, a guy who I know quite well at the Lamborghini factory called me up and said, I hear you're rebuilding these. I said, yeah. Don't tell Coney though. because I did get a cease and desist letter from Coney on rebuilding the electronics. But since I'm not authorized by, a Coney dealer or ever had any connections with them, what can they do? Nothing. Besides that, this is America. Anyway, he said, well, we've got a whole bunch of them here. If I send you some, can you rebuild us about 4 sets? So I expected, a couple of boxes of shocks. 2 big crates come here. Well, here's like shocks like this. Now here's one I have not rebuilt yet. But for years, this was probably one of the most sophisticated shocks you could buy, period, bar none. Inside the RAM is there's a printed circuit board about the size of a postage stamp, a 12-volt electric motor, gearbox, and 2 position sensors.
Pretty sophisticated design.
It was. But they quit making it. And now no parts are available. So, again,
So you're able to rebuild, and you had offered to send us some of the electronics at some point in time if you ever get stuck. More than willing to help you out with that.
Okay, good. I'll take you up on it.
Okay.
But as far as doing, I do several brands. I like it. It's fun. And besides that, I've learned so much because I do have a shock dyno besides the machinery to do it. And so it's also kind of fun to get some shocks in from some other company that's rebuilt them. And I'll throw them on the dyno and find them way off because I know they didn't dyno.
Right. Now, was a dyno something that you built custom, or?
Oh, no. That was a piece of equipment made by, well, it was Roig was the name of the company. And they made shock dynos and testers for years. And I just bought one of theirs because they're the most well-known. They've got a good program to go with the dyno and easy to use. And a Neanderthal like me can run a dyno, geez,
Right.
Well, I shouldn't say run a dyno. I can run a dyno. It's the computers to blow my mind.
Yeah. Jeff, thank you so much for inviting us to your shop and all the great work that you're doing for us with those Tesla Roadster shocks. As always, continue to support our channel. Hit that like button if you like what you see, and we're going to be bringing you more of this kind of tech, Tesla, and other EV platforms as well. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pete Gruber and Jeff LeBlond signing off.